Okay, here we go. Here's our percent of change lesson for today. A little bit bigger. All right, percent of change, guys. To find the percent of change, it's pretty easy, okay? All you're going to do is take the amount of change. So you're going to subtract the amounts. And I always look at it as an absolute value amount, so don't worry about, which way do you subtract them. You always find your amount of change as a positive number, so the absolute value of the amount of change. And that is going to go over the original amount. And the original amount is the amount that you start with. Okay? So that is how you find the percent of change. Now you could have a percent of increase or a percent of decrease. And how's that? Well, if the new amount is greater than the original amount, that would be a percent of increase. It went up. If the new amount is less than the original amount, then it is a percent of decrease. That means it went down. Okay, so you can have a percent of increase and a percent of decrease, which you do need to identify which one it kind of percent it is. And then again, to find that, you take the amount of change divided by the original amount. Okay, all right, I'm going to move on to the next slide. Got 3 examples today. Okay, in our first example here, we're going to have a percent of increase. So to find the percent of increase here, we have our balloon festival. Okay. Fiesta, sorry. And what we had is in 1999 we had 903 balloons, and in 2000 we had 1,019. So what is the percent of increase? What was our percent of change there? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my percent of increase equal to the amount of change, so that's going to be 1,019 minus 903. Again, always looking at it as a positive, over the original amount. Well, the original amount, in time's sake, would be the first amount that we have, so that would be the 1999 number, and that would be 903. So then what I have here is the percent of change equals 116 over 903. When you type that in your calculator, you're going to get 0.128. Now I want to know what percent that is. That is a decimal form, so my answer is going to be 12.8%, and that is an increase. Okay, so I'm going to put increase. So my percentage change was a 12.8% increase. Okay, and that is how you find your percentage change. So I subtracted my numbers first, and then I divided it by the original amount where I started from. Okay, I'm going to move on to example 2. Okay, in example 2, find a percent of decrease is going to be the same thing. A hotel had 500 people stay one weekend. The next weekend they only had 320 people stay. What is the percent change? Well, to find that, again, I'm going to subtract the numbers. 512 minus 320 over the original amount. Well, the original amount would have been the first weekend that they had people. 512. Okay. When I subtract these two numbers, I'm going to get the percent of change equal to 192 over 512. All right, that's 192 divided by 512. When you divide those, you are going to get 0.375, which as a percent is 37.5%, and that is a decrease. Okay, so in this hotel, their amount of people from one weekend to the next weekend went down 37.5%. Okay, so that is a decrease because the amount of people who stayed there was lower than the people who stayed there the previous weekend. Okay, I'm going to move on to example 3. Using a percent of increase. Okay, let's say we buy stock XYZ for $30. This might be a real life something that something that you guys do in the real life. All right, you're going to sell the stock when you make at least a 75% increase. Okay, so maybe after 75% you feel like, okay, I got to get rid of this because it's made as much money as it's going to make. All right, at what amount would you try to sell the stock? Okay, so you in your mind might have an idea. Okay, I paid $30 for this originally. I want it to go up 75%, and once it goes up 75%, I'm going to try to sell it, make my money off that. That's how you make money on the stock market, by selling when it's higher than when you bought it for. So how do I do this? Well, for this amount, I want to know what my increase is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my original amount, 30. I'm going to add it to my percent that I want it to increase by the original amount. So I'm going to take 75% plus, or times, 30. Okay? So the 30 is my original amount. That's how much I started with, plus the 75% times 30 is the increase that it's going to go up. So that's my percent equation rules there. And so when I do 75%, again, use 0.75 in your calculator and multiply it. Okay? When you multiply those two together, you are going to get 22.5. Now add those together, and you get 52.5. So what does that mean? In the context of this problem, at $52.50 is when you will try to sell your stock. Okay? As far as work goes, guys and girls in class, you can do this step, and then you can show this step. You can skip this intermediate step. Okay, you don't need to show that, but I do want to see you setting up your problem and then your answer that you get from it. Okay? The nice thing about putting the 30 in the equation is then you don't have to find that number and then add it back. Okay? So the percent of increase is $22.50. That's how much money you're looking to increase it. Okay? The actual money, and then you add it back to the original, and so you would sell it $52.50. Okay? That is all I have for today. Have a wonderful night, and we will practice these tomorrow.